I am Isabel, 29 years old, living in Boston and working as an accountant. My entire life, I have lived in the shadow of my older sister Megan. She was always the golden child who could do no wrong. Last year, I caught her with my boyfriend of 3 years, Jake. When I confronted my family, they chose her side. They always did. What they never expected was how I would make them pay for their betrayal. Let me know where you are watching from, and hit the like and subscribe buttons if you have ever been betrayed by those who should have protected you. Growing up in a suburban Boston neighborhood, my family appeared perfect from the outside. My father, William, was a respected attorney at a prestigious law firm downtown. At 58, he commanded respect with his tailored suits and confident demeanor. My mother, Diana, 55, managed a popular local restaurant that was known for its exquisite cuisine and impeccable service. And then there was my sister, Megan, 32, who recently became the marketing director at a Fortune 500 company. The perfect American family, or so it seemed. From my earliest memories, Megan was the center of our family universe. When we were children, her drawings were always displayed prominently on the refrigerator, while mine were tucked away in drawers. Her soccer trophies lined the mantel, even though I won academic competitions that went unacknowledged. During high school, my parents attended every one of her volleyball games, but missed my debate championships because they simply were not as important. "Your sister has natural talent," my father would say whenever I questioned the imbalance of attention. "You have to work harder to achieve what comes easily to her." When Megan graduated as valedictorian, my parents threw an extravagant party and invited the entire extended family. When I graduated with honors 2 years later, I received a card and a dinner at my favorite restaurant with just my parents. My achievements were measured against hers and always found wanting. "Why cannot you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my teenage years. I tried so hard to gain their approval, pushing myself to excel in school and taking on extracurricular activities that would impress them. Nothing ever seemed enough. Even my physical appearance became a point of comparison. Megan inherited our mother's slender build and our father's striking blue eyes. I took after my mother's side of the family with a curvier figure and warm brown eyes. Comments about my weight were thinly veiled as concern for my health, while Megan was praised for maintaining her figure. "Megan never had trouble with her weight," my mother would say while pushing a salad toward me during family dinners. By the time I entered college, I had accepted my place in the family hierarchy. I chose accounting not because I loved it, but because it was practical and would provide financial stability. Megan pursued marketing because it was creative and dynamic, according to my father, who beamed with pride at her career choice. After college, I secured a position at a respectable accounting firm in Boston. It wasn't glamorous, but I was good at it and slowly built a reputation for myself. Meanwhile, Megan climbed the corporate ladder with startling speed, each promotion celebrated with champagne and congratulatory calls from relatives. It was during a corporate charity event 3 years ago that I met Jake. He was 30 years old, worked in the IT department of a partner company, and had the warmest smile I had ever seen. Unlike the other men I had dated, Jake was genuinely interested in me. Not my family, not my sister, but me. Our first date was at a small coffee shop where we talked for hours about everything from childhood memories to future dreams. Jake listened attentively, asking questions that showed he was truly interested in knowing me. He laughed at my jokes and shared his own vulnerabilities. For the first time in my life, I felt seen and valued. "You have the most expressive eyes," he told me on our third date. "I can see exactly what you are thinking." Over the next few months, our relationship deepened. We spent weekends exploring New England, took cooking classes together, and slowly built a connection that felt unshakable. Jake became my confidant, the person I turned to when work became stressful or when family dynamics threatened to pull me under. After a year of dating, we decided to move in together. We found a cozy apartment with a small balcony where we would have breakfast on Sunday mornings, planning our future together. We talked about buying a house eventually, perhaps starting a family when we were both ready. Despite being with Jake for nearly 3 years, I had intentionally kept him separate from my family. I told myself it was because I wanted something that was just mine, untouched by the family dynamics that had shaped so much of my life. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was afraid. Afraid that they would compare him to Megan's boyfriends and find him lacking. afraid that they would wonder what someone like him saw in someone like me. But as our third Christmas together approached, Jake began asking questions. "When am I going to meet your family?" he asked one evening as we decorated our small Christmas tree. 3 years together, and I have never even seen a photo of them. I had run out of excuses, and perhaps I thought it was time. We were talking about a future together. My family would have to be part of that future. So after much deliberation, I invited Jake to join me for Christmas dinner at my parents' house. "They will love you," I assured him, hoping it was true. "Just be yourself." Little did I know that this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would destroy everything I thought I knew about love, family, and loyalty. The drive to my parents' suburban home on Christmas Day was tense. Jake kept adjusting his tie and asking if he looked okay. I reassured him repeatedly, though my own stomach was in knots. As we pulled into the driveway of the colonial-style house, decorated with tasteful white lights, I took a deep breath. "Remember, my sister can be a bit intense," I warned Jake one last time. "She tends to dominate conversations, so do not take it personally if she talks over you." Jake squeezed my hand. "It will be fine. They are just people, Ysabel." But they weren't just people to me. They were the jury that had been finding me guilty of inadequacy my entire life. My mother answered the door wearing a festive red dress, her blonde hair perfectly styled. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in Jake's 6-foot frame and warm smile. "You must be Jake," she said, offering her cheek for a kiss. "We have heard so little about you." The slight dig wasn't lost on me, but Jake handled it smoothly. "That's because Ysabel is too busy telling me how wonderful her family is," he replied with charm that made even my mother smile genuinely. The house smelled of roasted turkey and cinnamon, the dining room set with the good china and crystal glasses that only appeared on special occasions. My father emerged from his study, extending his hand to Jake with an appraising look. "So, you work in IT?" he asked, leading us to the living room where a fire crackled in the fireplace. "That must be interesting with all the changes in technology these days." Jake launched into a discussion about cybersecurity that actually seemed to impress my father. I watched in amazement as they bonded over the challenges of protecting sensitive information in the digital age. My father rarely showed this much interest in anyone I brought home. The doorbell rang, and my mother returned with Megan. My sister wore a figure-hugging green dress that complemented her eyes, her blonde hair cascading down her back. She air-kissed me briefly before turning her full attention to Jake. "Finally, the mysterious boyfriend appears," she said, offering her hand with a dazzling smile. "I was beginning to think Ysabel had made you up." Jake laughed. "Very real, I promise. It is great to finally meet you. Ysabel mentioned you work in marketing." And just like that, Megan launched into a detailed account of her recent promotion and the major campaign she was spearheading. Jake listened attentively, asking intelligent questions that kept the conversation flowing. I noticed how animated he became, his eyes bright with interest. During dinner, the dynamic continued. My parents asked Jake about his background, his career aspirations, his family. They seemed genuinely impressed by his thoughtful responses. I should have been happy, but something felt off. The way Megan kept finding reasons to touch Jake's arm when making a point, the way she directed her most charming stories toward him, laughing a little too loudly at his jokes. "Jake, you must try the wine William brought back from Napa Valley," Megan insisted, reaching across me to pour him another glass, her hand lingering near his longer than necessary. "I should show you the backyard lighting system I installed," my father told Jake after dinner. "As someone in tech, you might appreciate it." The men disappeared outside while I helped my mother and Megan clear the table. In the kitchen, Megan wouldn't stop talking about Jake. "He is so much more impressive than your last boyfriend," she remarked, loading the dishwasher. "Where have you been hiding him? He's intelligent, handsome, and he actually has a sense of humor." "He is not a specimen for your approval, Megan," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "But I am glad you like him." "Like him, he's great," she continued. "I cannot believe you found someone so compatible. You know what they say about opposites attracting, but you two seem so different." The backhanded compliment stung, but I ignored it. This was typical Megan behavior. I wouldn't let it ruin the evening. When Jake and I left that night, he couldn't stop talking about my family, particularly Megan. "Your sister is exactly how you described her, but funnier," he said as we drove home. "And your dad really knows his technology for someone his age. I didn't expect that." "They were definitely on their best behavior tonight," I replied, trying to ignore the unease settling in my stomach. Over the next few weeks, Jake brought up Megan in conversation more frequently than I was comfortable with. "Megan sent me an article about that security issue we discussed," he mentioned casually one evening. "You exchanged contact information?" I asked, surprised. Jake shrugged. "She asked for my number to send me that restaurant recommendation. Remember? It's no big deal." I tried to dismiss my concerns as paranoia. Jake loved me. He had chosen me. My insecurities about Megan were just that, insecurities. But then Megan began appearing at family gatherings she would normally skip, always dressed impeccably, always directing special attention to Jake. She found reasons to text him professional questions that somehow required his specific expertise. When we attended my cousin's wedding, Megan saved Jake a seat next to her at the reception, claiming she wanted to discuss a potential IT contract for her company. Jake's behavior began to change subtly. He started working late more often, his explanations vague and inconsistent. He became protective of his phone, turning it face down when I entered the room. There were mysterious calls he would take in another room, his voice too low for me to hear. Our intimacy suffered. Jake began citing stress and exhaustion as reasons to avoid physical connection. When we did make love, it felt mechanical, as if he was going through the motions. "Is everything okay?" I asked one night after another rejected advance. "Just tired from work," he mumbled, turning away from me in bed. I convinced myself I was overreacting, that work stress was affecting our relationship temporarily. Jake was committed to me. We had plans, a future together. My sister might be the golden child in my family's eyes, but Jake saw me for who I was. He wouldn't betray that, would he? Jake's 31st birthday fell on a Saturday in April. He had mentioned having to work that day, which seemed odd for a weekend, but I decided to surprise him with an impromptu celebration. I baked his favorite chocolate cake, bought a bottle of whiskey he had been wanting to try, and drove to his office downtown. When I arrived at the eerily empty parking garage, I realized something was wrong. Jake's car wasn't there. No cars were there. The building appeared completely deserted for the weekend. My heart began to race as I called his cell phone. No answer. I texted him. No response. Maybe he had gone to the gym, I reasoned, or perhaps he was meeting a client elsewhere. But why lie about being at work? I drove to his apartment, the one he had kept even after we moved in together, claiming he needed space for his gaming equipment and home office. He used it occasionally when working late, saying it was closer to his office than our shared home. His car was in the parking lot. Relief washed over me, followed immediately by confusion. Why had he lied? Was he planning a surprise for me? Instead, I still had the key he had given me for emergencies. Quietly, I let myself in, thinking perhaps I could add to whatever birthday plans he had made. The apartment was silent, but I noticed 2 wine glasses on the coffee table and a woman's jacket draped over the back of a chair. A jacket I recognized as Megan's. My hands began to shake as I moved toward the bedroom. The door was partially open, and I could hear muffled voices and laughter. A cold weight settled in my stomach as I pushed the door fully open. There they were. My sister and my boyfriend tangled in his sheets. Megan's blonde hair spread across the pillow where I once laid my head. Jake's arms around her waist, his lips on her neck. They didn't notice me at first. I stood frozen, unable to process the scene before me. Then something inside me broke, and a sound escaped my throat, a strangled cry that made them both look up in shock. "Ysabel." Jake scrambled to cover himself, his face draining of color. We weren't." Megan didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She sat up slowly, pulling the sheet around her chest, her eyes meeting mine with something like defiance. "You weren't supposed to find out this way," she said calmly, as if that somehow made it better. "How long?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. They exchanged a glance that told me everything. This wasn't the first time. "About 2 months, Jake admitted, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "It just happened, Ysabel. We didn't plan it. Just happened, I repeated, my voice rising. For 2 months. You have been sleeping with my sister for 2 months behind my back, and it just happened. Megan sighed as if my reaction was an inconvenience. We didn't want to hurt you. That's why we kept it quiet. These things are complicated, Ysabel. Jake and I connected on a level that— Don't you dare! I cut her off, fury replacing shock. Don't you dare try to justify this. You are my sister. He is my boyfriend of 3 years. There is no justification. Jake attempted to approach me, reaching for my hand. Ysabel, please, let's talk about this rationally. I never meant for any of this to happen. I care about you, I really do, but Megan and I slapped him hard across the face, the sound echoing in the suddenly silent room. You don't get to talk to me about rational, I hissed. Not when you have been lying to my face for months. Not when you have been sleeping with my sister while sharing my bed. I turned to Megan, who watched the exchange with that same impassive expression. And you. All my life you have taken everything from me. Everything I valued. Everything I loved. And now Jake was nothing off limits to you. Was there no line you wouldn't cross? Megan finally had the grace to look uncomfortable. It isn't like that. We didn't choose for this to happen. Sometimes feelings develop and you can't control them. We were going to tell you after we figured things out. Figured what out? How to keep betraying me, how to keep lying to me. Whether what we have is real, Jake interjected, as if that would somehow make everything better. I laughed bitterly. Well, I hope it was worth it. I hope destroying me was worth whatever this is. I turned and walked out of the bedroom, out of the apartment, ignoring their calls to come back to talk it through. In my car, I finally let the tears come, great heaving sobs that made it difficult to breathe. I don't remember the drive home, only that somehow I made it without crashing. The next few days passed in a blur. I called in sick to work, unable to face people, unable to function. I didn't eat. I barely slept. Both Jake and Megan tried to contact me repeatedly, their messages ranging from apologetic to defensive. I blocked their numbers, deleted their emails unread. Friends called concerned about my absence, but I couldn't bring myself to explain. How do you tell someone that the two people you trusted most in the world had conspired to betray you? After a week of isolation, I knew I needed to confront my family. I needed to know if they were aware, if everyone had been laughing behind my back while I remained oblivious. More than that, I needed their support, their outrage on my behalf. For once in my life, I needed them to choose me. The following Sunday, I drove to my parents' house, rehearsing what I would say, how I would explain the situation without breaking down. They always had Sunday dinner together, a tradition I had been avoiding since the discovery. Today, I would face them. My mother answered the door, surprise registering on her face. Ysabel, we weren't expecting you. Are you all right? You look terrible. I brushed past her into the familiar living room where my father sat reading the newspaper. He looked up, his glasses perched on the end of his nose. This is unexpected, he commented, folding the paper. Everything okay at work? No. I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Everything is not okay. I need to talk to you both about Megan and Jake. My mother's expression changed immediately, a flicker of something, knowledge perhaps, crossing her face. She sat down beside my father, hands folded primly in her lap. What about them? She asked carefully. I caught them together last week, in bed. They have been having an affair behind my back for months. The silence that followed wasn't the shocked, outraged silence I had expected. It was heavy, uncomfortable, laden with something I couldn't immediately identify. You knew, I realized, looking between them. You already knew. My father cleared his throat. Megan mentioned that she and Jake had developed feelings for each other. She said they were going to tell you properly after his birthday. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. And you were okay with this? Your daughter betraying your other daughter? Now, Ysabel, my mother interjected, her tone conciliatory. These situations are never black and white. Megan assured us it wasn't intentional. These things happen. People fall in and out of love. I stared at her in disbelief. These things happen, Mom. My boyfriend and my sister were sneaking around behind my back for months. They lied to me repeatedly. How can you dismiss that as, these things happen? My father shifted uncomfortably. No one is dismissing your feelings, Ysabel. Of course, this is difficult for you, but perhaps it's for the best in the long run. For the best, I echoed, my voice rising. How could my boyfriend cheating on me with my own sister possibly be for the best? My mother had the audacity to reach for my hand, her expression sympathetic but her words cutting. Honey, Jake is an ambitious, intelligent man with a bright future. Perhaps he and Megan are simply more compatible intellectually and professionally. They share the same drive, the same goals. The implication hung in the air between us that I wasn't good enough for Jake, that Megan, as always, was the better choice. And what about loyalty? I demanded. What about the promises Jake made to me? What about Megan's obligation as my sister? My father sighed deeply. Ysabel, you are 29 years old. It's time to be mature about these things. Relationships end. People move on. Making a scene will only make things more difficult for everyone. Everyone meaning Megan, I clarified bitterly. Meaning the family, my father corrected. We have to continue seeing each other living in the same city. Creating drama and holding grudges will make that impossible. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. In my moment of greatest pain when I needed my parents most, they were effectively telling me to get over it for the sake of family harmony, for Megan's comfort. So, what am I supposed to do? I asked. Pretend it never happened. Give them my blessing. Perhaps some distance would be good, my mother suggested. Some time to adjust to the new situation. Jake will be part of family gatherings now with Megan. It would be easier for everyone if you could be civil. Civil? I repeated incredulously. You expect me to sit across the dinner table from the man who betrayed me and the sister who stole him and be civil? That's exactly what adults do, my father said firmly. They put aside personal grievances for the greater good. I stood up, shaking with anger and hurt. The greater good being Megan's happiness as always. Her feelings, her needs, her wants always taking precedence over mine. That's not fair, Ysabel, my mother protested weakly. We love both our daughters equally. The lie hung between us so blatant that even she couldn't meet my eyes as she said it. You have never loved us equally, I said quietly. Megan has always been the favorite, the golden child who could do no wrong. And now, even when she has done something unforgivable, you are choosing her side. We are not choosing sides, my father insisted. We are trying to be practical. I laughed without humor. Practical would be supporting the daughter who was wronged, not the one who did the wronging. But I shouldn't be surprised, should I? This is exactly what you have always done. The conversation deteriorated from there. My parents continued to defend Megan's actions, suggesting that perhaps I hadn't been attentive enough to Jake's needs, that maybe I had driven him away somehow. They urged me to be mature about the situation, to give Megan and Jake space to explore their relationship without my interference. 2 weeks later, I saw the first photos on social media. Megan and Jake at a family barbecue I hadn't been invited to. My cousins and aunts commenting with heart emojis, congratulating them on finding each other. As if their relationship had a storybook beginning rather than being built on lies and betrayal. The extended family fell in line quickly. Aunt Rachel, who had always favored Megan, called to tell me that these things happen for a reason, and that perhaps Jake was always meant to be with Megan. Uncle George, my father's brother, suggested that I move on gracefully for the sake of family unity. Not a single family member reached out to ask how I was doing, how I was coping with the double betrayal. It was as if my pain was an inconvenience, a wrinkle in the otherwise perfect narrative of Megan and Jake's romance. The final straw came a month after my discovery. My mother called, her voice bright and brittle. Darling, I need to discuss something with you. Megan and Jake have decided to get engaged. Isn't that wonderful? I said nothing, the phone cold against my ear. We're planning an engagement party at the country club next month. It would mean so much to Megan if you could attend. Show everyone that there are no hard feelings. No hard feelings. As if my sister sleeping with my boyfriend was equivalent to borrowing a sweater without asking. I won't be attending, I said flatly. Ysabel, please. Think about how it will look if you are not there. People will talk. Let them talk, I replied. I don't care anymore. You are being selfish, my mother snapped, her pleasant facade cracking. This is an important day for your sister. Can't you put aside your jealousy for one evening? Jealousy. That was how they saw my pain. Not as a legitimate response to betrayal, but as petty jealousy. I have to go, Mom, I said, and hung up before she could respond. That night, lying awake in the apartment that still held traces of Jake's presence, I finally accepted the truth. My family would never take my side. They would never see the injustice of what had been done to me. To them, Megan's happiness would always outweigh my pain. And in that moment of clarity, something hardened inside me. If they wouldn't give me justice, perhaps I would have to find it for myself. In the weeks following my mother's call about the engagement party, I fell into a deep depression. I went through the motions at work, but colleagues noticed my withdrawal. I stopped socializing, ignored calls from the few friends I had, and spent evenings staring at walls, replaying moments with Jake and Megan, looking for signs I had missed. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison of memories. Jake's favorite coffee mug still in the cupboard, the throw pillow Megan had given us as a housewarming gift mocking me from the couch. I considered moving, but the lease wouldn't end for months, and I couldn't afford the penalty for breaking it early. After 2 months of barely functioning, I realized I needed help. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Larson, who helped me understand that my reaction wasn't just about Jake and Megan's betrayal, but about a lifetime of feeling second best in my family. What you are experiencing is complicated grief, she explained during one session. You haven't just lost your relationship with Jake, but also your relationship with your sister, and in many ways your parents. That's a significant loss. Through therapy, I began to see how unhealthy my family dynamic had been all along. How I had internalized the message that I was somehow less worthy than Megan. How I had accepted scraps of affection and approval because I believed I didn't deserve more. Around this time, I also decided I needed a fresh start professionally. The accounting firm where I worked was where I had met Jake, and too many colleagues knew about our relationship. The pitying glances and hushed conversations that stopped when I entered the break room were becoming unbearable. I updated my resume and began applying for positions at other firms. During a networking event downtown, I ran into Paul Jackson, a former colleague of my father's. I had met him several times at firm functions as a child and teenager. Now in his 60s, Paul had retired from active practice but still maintained connections in the legal community. Ysabel Williams, he greeted me warmly. It has been years. How is your father doing? He's well, I replied automatically. Still practicing at Harrison and Wright. Paul's expression changed subtly. Is he? I'm surprised they kept him after that ethics complaint. I frowned, confused. Ethics complaint? What are you talking about? Paul looked uncomfortable, realizing he had said too much. I'm sorry, I assumed you knew. It was kept quiet, of course. These things usually are when they involve partners' children. Partners' children, I pressed. Paul, what exactly are you talking about? Over drinks at a nearby bar. Paul reluctantly shared what he knew. Apparently 5 years earlier, my father had been involved in a case where the opposing party was the son of one of the firm's biggest clients. My father had suppressed evidence that would have been favorable to this young man, ensuring a win for his own client. When the evidence came to light, the firm had covered it up and my father had narrowly escaped disbarment. It was hushed up quickly, Paul explained. Money changed hands. The young man's record was eventually expunged, but his life was derailed for several years. I sat in stunned silence, trying to reconcile this information with the image of my righteous, ethical father, who had lectured me about honesty throughout my childhood. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. Paul shrugged, swirling the ice in his glass. I never thought it was right how they handled it. Your father should have faced consequences. Instead, he got a promotion the following year. This revelation sparked something in me, a curiosity about what else my family might be hiding behind their perfect facade. If my father, the paragon of virtue and ethics, had been involved in such a scandal, what about my mother? What about Megan? Over the next few weeks, I began digging. I reached out to former classmates of Megan's colleagues from her previous jobs, anyone who might have a different perspective on my golden sister. I used skills from my accounting background to trace financial records and search public databases. What I discovered was shocking. My father hadn't just been involved in one ethical lapse. There was a pattern of questionable decisions cases where evidence mysteriously disappeared, witnesses who suddenly changed their testimony. He had apparently been accepting bribes from clients for years, carefully laundered through offshore accounts. My mother's restaurant, the source of so much family pride, had been cutting corners in alarming ways. Health code violations covered up by bribes to inspectors, tax evasion through unreported cash transactions. Even more disturbing, I discovered they had been using expired ingredients, risking customers' health to save money. And Megan, perfect Megan, had the most secrets of all. Her impressive educational credentials included a master's degree from a prestigious university that she had never actually completed. She had been fired from her first job for plagiarizing a colleague's work, but had managed to have the record sealed. Her meteoric rise at her current company was helped by taking credit for subordinates' ideas and manipulating data to make her department's performance look better than it was. I gathered evidence meticulously. Financial records showing irregular payments, emails my father had carelessly left on a family cloud account, testimonials from former employees at my mother's restaurant. A damning letter from Megan's university confirming she had never completed her degree program. As the evidence mounted, I wrestled with what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to confront them, to force them to acknowledge their hypocrisy. But I knew how that would go. They would deny everything close ranks and paint me as the bitter, jealous daughter trying to cause trouble. For weeks, I debated with myself, discussed it in therapy sessions with Dr. Larson. "What do you hope to achieve?" she asked during one session. "Justice," I replied immediately. "Consequences for their actions." "And is that about justice or revenge?" I didn't have a clear answer. The line between the two had become blurred. The decision was ultimately made for me when I received an elegant cream envelope in the mail. Inside was an invitation to Megan and Jake's engagement party. The date was set for 6 weeks later at the country club. My mother had included a handwritten note. "Please come. It's time to put the past behind us and be a family again." As if it were that simple, as if they hadn't all chosen to protect Megan at my expense, as if I could simply forget the betrayal and smile across a champagne toast. That night, I made my decision. My family had never faced consequences for their actions. They had built their lives on lies, manipulation, and favoritism, hurting not just me, but others along the way. Perhaps it was time for the truth to come to light. I began organizing the evidence I had collected, creating comprehensive files detailing each family member's transgressions. I created anonymous email accounts and prepared to send the information to the relevant authorities, regulatory boards, and in my father and Megan's cases, their employers. The night before, I planned to send everything. I sat alone in my apartment, questioning myself one last time. Was I doing this for justice or out of pain? Was I no better than them, willing to hurt others to get what I wanted? But then I remembered my mother's words when I discovered the affair. Perhaps Jake and Megan are simply more compatible. I remembered my father urging me to be mature and accept my sister's relationship with the man I loved. I remembered a lifetime of being second best, of having my feelings dismissed, my achievements minimized. No, this wasn't just about revenge. This was about holding them accountable, about refusing to be the family scapegoat any longer. This was about standing up for myself when no one else would. With newfound resolve, I finalized my plans. The timing would be perfect. The truth would come to light just days before Megan's precious engagement party. Let them deal with the consequences of their actions while trying to celebrate their ill-gotten happiness. I sent the evidence to the appropriate recipients on a Monday morning, 3 days before Megan and Jake's engagement party. Anonymous emails containing meticulously documented evidence went out to the State Bar Association regarding my father's ethical violations. Similar packages were sent to the Health Department and IRS concerning my mother's restaurant. Megan's employers received proof of her falsified credentials and professional misconduct. Then I waited, tracking news and social media for the first signs of impact. I didn't have to wait long. By Wednesday, my father's law firm had announced he was taking a leave of absence pending an internal investigation. The State Bar Association had opened a formal inquiry into his conduct, focusing on 7 cases where evidence suggested improper behavior. Former clients were coming forward with their own stories, encouraged by the initial revelations. My mother's restaurant was shut down by the health department after an emergency inspection found numerous violations. Local news picked up the story, interviewing former employees who confirmed the long-standing issues with food safety and labor practices. The IRS had launched an audit that would eventually uncover years of tax evasion. Megan's situation unraveled most publicly. Her company issued a terse statement announcing her departure, but industry blogs quickly filled in the details. Her falsified master's degree, the pattern of claiming credit for others' work, the manipulated data that had misled investors. Former colleagues emerged with stories of bullying and sabotage that painted a picture very different from Megan's polished professional image. On Thursday night, the eve of what should have been their engagement celebration, Megan called me hysterical. "Did you do this?" she demanded, her voice raw from crying. "Are you behind all of this?" "Behind what?" I asked innocently, though my heart raced with vindication. "Don't play dumb. Someone sent my company evidence that I never finished my MBA. They fired me, Ysabel. My career is ruined. Dad is being investigated by the bar. Mom's restaurant is closed. It had to be you." "Why would I do something like that?" I countered. "I'm just the jealous sister. Remember, the one who couldn't handle losing Jake to you." Her sharp intake of breath told me she recognized her own words thrown back at her. "This is insane," she sputtered. "You have destroyed our family because you couldn't stand seeing me happy. Do you know what you have done?" "The engagement party is canceled. Jake's company is distancing themselves from him because of his connection to me. Mom and Dad might lose everything." "Actions have consequences, Megan," I replied calmly. "Something you never seemed to learn growing up." She began to sob. "How could you be so cruel? We're family." "Family?" I laughed bitterly. "Is that what we are? Because when I came to you as family after finding you in bed with Jake, you showed no remorse. When I went to Mom and Dad for support, they told me to get over it for your sake. None of you treated me like family then." "That was different," she insisted. "No, it wasn't. It was just another example of how rules don't apply to Megan. How Megan gets whatever she wants regardless of who it hurts. Well, not anymore." I hung up as she began another tirade, blocking her number immediately after. The next morning, my parents and Megan showed up at my apartment unannounced. My father looked haggard, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed from crying. Megan stood slightly behind them, her expression a mixture of fury and fear. "We need to talk," my father said when I opened the door, his authoritative tone a poor match for his diminished appearance. I let them in, silently watching as they took in my small living room, now purged of all reminders of Jake. They sat awkwardly on my couch while I remained standing. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" My father began, his voice tight with controlled anger. 40 years building my career, my reputation all destroyed because of your vindictiveness." "I simply made sure the truth came to light," I replied. "Something you claim to value as an attorney. By sending anonymous accusations, by digging through private records. That's not justice. That's a vendetta." "Interesting that you're more concerned with how the information came out than with the fact that it was true." My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "Ysabel, please. We're your family. How could you do this to us?" "The same way you did it to me," I answered evenly, by deciding that one person's feelings didn't matter, by choosing sides. "This isn't the same thing at all," my mother protested. "What happened with Jake and Megan was personal between the 3 of you. What you have done affects our livelihoods, our reputations, our entire future. And what they did affected my heart, my trust, my sense of worth. But that didn't matter to any of you, did it?" Megan stepped forward, her eyes flashing. "So this is revenge, pure and simple." "Call it what you want. I call it consequences." "You have to fix this," my father demanded. "Call the Bar Association. Tell them you made it all up. Same with the health department and Megan's company." I laughed, genuinely amused by his naivety. I can't fix this. The evidence speaks for itself. It's all true, isn't it? Every accusation, every document, every testimony. You did these things. All of you. You just never expected to be held accountable. We could lose everything, my mother whispered. The house, our savings. Your father might be disbarred. Is that what you want? What I wanted was a family who loved me as much as they loved Megan. What I wanted was parents who would stand by me when I was betrayed. What I wanted was a sister who respected boundaries. I didn't get any of those things. So you ruined our lives out of spite, Megan accused. No, you ruined your own lives through your choices. I just made sure those choices caught up with you. The conversation devolved from there. My father threatened legal action, though we both knew he was in no position to follow through. My mother alternated between pleading and guilt-tripping. Megan vacillated between rage and tears. I remained calm throughout a stark contrast to their emotional outbursts. In the end, they left with nothing resolved, no promises of help, no reconciliation. As the door closed behind them, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to my family and refused to back down. Over the next few months, the consequences continued to unfold. My father was eventually disbarred after the investigation revealed multiple instances of evidence tampering and witness intimidation. My mother's restaurant closed permanently with additional penalties for tax evasion. Megan struggled to find new employment, her reputation tarnished by the revelations about her professional conduct. Jake, caught in the crossfire, distanced himself from Megan as her star fell. Their engagement ended quietly with no announcement, just the disappearance of relationship status from social media. He reached out to me once, a rambling email about regrets and mistakes that I deleted without responding. My parents had to sell their house to cover legal fees and back taxes, moving to a small apartment in a less prestigious neighborhood. Family friends who had once admired them now avoided them at social functions. The perfect family image they had cultivated for decades was shattered beyond repair. Did I feel guilt? Sometimes in quiet moments, I questioned whether my actions had been too severe. But then I would remember the callousness with which they had dismissed my pain, the years of favoritism that had shaped my self-image, the utter lack of remorse for the betrayal I had suffered. And the guilt would fade, replaced by a sense of justice served. I had finally stood up for myself in a way they couldn't ignore or minimize. I had refused to be the family scapegoat any longer. And despite the chaos I had unleashed, I felt freer than I had in years. Was it revenge? Perhaps. But it was also liberation. For the first time in my life, I had taken control of my own narrative. And I had no regrets. 1 year after the implosion of my family, my life looked dramatically different. I had secured a position at a prestigious accounting firm in a different part of the city, where no one knew about my family drama. My colleagues respected my work ethic and attention to detail, and I had already received one promotion. The apartment that had once been filled with memories of Jake was now truly mine. I had repainted, purchased new furniture, and created a space that reflected my own tastes rather than compromises made for a relationship. Plants thrived on my windowsills. Books I had always wanted to read filled my shelves and artwork I had chosen solely because it spoke to me adorned the walls. Therapy with Dr. Larson continued, though less frequently. We had worked through much of my anger and hurt, focusing now on building healthy boundaries and recognizing my own worth independent of others' validation. "You've come a long way," she remarked during one session. "When we started, your sense of self was so tied to your family's perception of you. That's no longer the case." She was right. The journey hadn't been easy, but I had emerged stronger, more confident in my own values and judgments. 6 months into my new job, I met Adam, a tax specialist who worked on the floor above mine. At 31, he had a quiet confidence and dry sense of humor that I found appealing. Our first few interactions were purely professional consulting on shared clients, but gradually evolved into coffee breaks and lunch discussions that ranged far beyond work topics. Unlike Jake, Adam didn't need to be the center of attention. He listened more than he spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in my perspectives. When I finally told him about my family expecting judgment or discomfort, he surprised me. "That sounds incredibly painful," he said simply. "I can't imagine how difficult that must have been for you." No defense of my family's actions. No suggestion that I should reconcile for the sake of harmony. Just acknowledgement of my experience and empathy for my pain. We began dating cautiously. I was wary of trusting again, of making myself vulnerable to betrayal. Adam understood, never pushing for more than I was ready to give, patient as I worked through my hesitations. "Relationships shouldn't be a competition or a performance," he told me one evening as we walked along the harbor. "They should be a safe place where both people can be authentically themselves." The concept was so foreign to my experience that it took time to truly believe it was possible. But Adam proved consistent, reliable, and genuinely supportive. For the first time, I experienced a relationship based on mutual respect, rather than constant evaluation. While building this new life, I maintained my distance from my family. They had made several attempts to re-establish contact, each with varying degrees of sincerity. My father's approaches were thinly veiled attempts to salvage his reputation, suggesting that my forgiveness might somehow help his case with the Bar Association. My mother vacillated between guilt-tripping messages about family obligation and angry accusations about the difficulties they now faced. Megan's attempts were the most persistent and, surprisingly, the most genuine. After months of bitter messages blaming me for destroying her life, her tone gradually shifted. An email arrived on my birthday, shorter and more subdued than her previous communications. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she wrote. "For the first time in my life, I've had to face consequences for my actions. It's been humbling, to say the least. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand now at least a little how it felt to be you all those years. I'm sorry, Ysabel. Truly sorry." I read the message several times, searching for manipulation or hidden agendas. Finding none, I allowed myself to feel a small measure of satisfaction that Megan had finally gained some self-awareness. I didn't respond, not yet ready for any kind of reconciliation, but I saved the email rather than deleting it, as I had all her previous messages. A month later, I received another unexpected communication, this time from Jake. His email was long and rambling, full of explanations about his own insecurities and how Megan had made him feel important in ways he had always craved. "I was weak," he admitted, "flattered by Megan's attention and too cowardly to be honest with you. What I did was unforgivable, and I don't expect your forgiveness. But I want you to know that you deserved better. You always deserved better than what I gave you." This message I did delete after reading, having no interest in reopening that particular wound. Jake's belated insights into his own character flaws were no longer my concern. During this period of reconstruction and healing, one family member did re-enter my life in a positive way. My grandmother Sophia, my mother's mother, had always been somewhat distant from our family dynamics, living in another state and visiting only occasionally. At 75, she reached out after hearing about the family implosion from my cousin. "Your mother isn't taking my calls," she explained when she invited me to lunch during her visit to Boston. "But I wanted to hear your side of things." Over a long meal at a quiet restaurant, I shared the whole story, from a childhood of feeling second best to the final betrayal and its aftermath. I expected defense of my mother, perhaps gentle suggestion that families should forgive each other. Instead, my grandmother nodded thoughtfully. "Your mother always favored Megan," she acknowledged. "I tried to point it out to her over the years how unfair it was to you, but she wouldn't hear it. Diana was determined to create the perfect family image, and somehow Megan fit that image better in her mind." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. My grandmother reached across the table to take my hand, her skin paper thin, but her grip surprisingly strong. "Because you should know that at least one person in this family saw what was happening. I should have done more, said more. Perhaps if I had, things wouldn't have reached this point." "It's not your fault," I assured her. "Nor is it yours," she replied firmly. "What happened to your family was the result of their own choices, their own deceptions. You simply brought those deceptions to light." It was validation I hadn't realized I still needed, and it opened the door to a relationship with my grandmother that became one of the most meaningful connections in my new life. As the months passed, I reflected often on what family truly meant. The people who share our DNA aren't always the ones who have our best interests at heart. Sometimes family is found in friends who stand by us, in colleagues who respect our work, in partners who value our authentic selves. I had begun building such a family around me. Adam, whose steady presence never made me question my worth. My friend Natalie from the new firm, who invited me to join her book club and genuinely listened when I spoke. Dr. Larson, whose professional guidance had helped me rebuild my sense of self. My grandmother Sophia, who offered the unconditional love I had always craved from my parents. 18 months after the family implosion, my mother reached out again. This time, her message was different from the previous ones. No accusations, no guilt-tripping, just a simple request to meet for coffee. Against my better judgment, perhaps I agreed. She looked older than I remembered, the stress of the past year and a half evident in the new lines around her eyes and mouth. We sat across from each other in uncomfortable silence before she finally spoke. "I've been seeing a therapist," she began hesitantly. "It was a condition of my probation for the tax issues at first, but it's been enlightening." I waited, offering nothing to make this easier for her. "She helped me see how unfairly I treated you growing up," my mother continued. "How I favored Megan. How I never really saw you for who you were." "And why are you telling me this now?" I asked, echoing the question I had posed to my grandmother months earlier. "Because I owe you an apology. A real one, not just because I want something from you." She paused, collecting herself. "I am truly sorry, Ysabel, for a lifetime of making you feel less than, for not supporting you when you needed me most, for failing you as a mother." The words I had longed to hear for decades. Yet now that they had been spoken, I found myself uncertain how to respond. Part of me wanted to accept immediately, to embrace this potential for healing. Another part remained wary, questioning her sincerity, her motives. "I appreciate you saying that," I said finally, "but I need time. This isn't something we can fix over coffee." She nodded, disappointment evident, but also understanding. "Of course. I just wanted you to know that I'm beginning to understand. And if you ever want to talk again, I'm here." As I walked away from that meeting, I felt neither triumph nor reconciliation, but something more nuanced. A door left slightly ajar, neither flung open nor firmly closed. Whether I would ever walk through it remained to be seen. My father never reached a similar point of self-reflection, his pride apparently preventing him from acknowledging his role in our family dysfunction. Megan continued her occasional emails, each showing more insight than the last, though I had yet to respond to any of them. The truth was, I no longer needed their approval or even their understanding. I had found my own path, built my own life, created my own definition of family based on mutual respect and genuine caring, rather than obligation or performance. Did I regret exposing their secrets, bringing their carefully constructed lives crashing down? No. Those actions had been necessary, not just for my own closure, but because their deceptions had harmed others beyond me. My father's ethical violations had impacted innocent clients. My mother's restaurant practices had put customers at risk. Megan's professional fraud had damaged her company and colleagues. What I did regret sometimes was that it had come to that point at all. That my family had been so committed to their facade, so unwilling to acknowledge their preferential treatment and the pain it caused, that only complete collapse had forced them to face reality. As for me, I had learned that standing up for myself wasn't selfish or vindictive, but necessary and right. That my worth wasn't determined by my family's assessment or by comparison to anyone else. That rebuilding after betrayal was possible, creating something stronger and more authentic than what had been destroyed. I've learned that sometimes family isn't about the people who share your blood. I told Adam one evening as we watched the sunset from my balcony. It's about the people who would shed blood for you. The ones who see you clearly and love you anyway. The ones who choose you day after day. He squeezed my hand gently, understanding the significance of what I was saying. And sometimes, he added, the family we're born into can still become the family we choose if they're willing to do the work. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps someday my mother and even Megan might become people I could welcome back into my life, as the family I chose rather than merely the family I was born into. That door remained ajar, the possibility neither embraced nor rejected. But for now, I was content with the life I had built from the ashes of betrayal. A life of authenticity, of boundaries, respected, of relationships based on mutual care rather than competition or performance. A life that was fully, genuinely mine. I ruined my family's life after they sided with my golden sister who cheated with my boyfriend. And I have no regrets. Have you ever had to create boundaries with family members who didn't respect you? What did you do? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of self-discovery and healing. Remember, sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the greatest growth. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for yourself, even against family. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength on your own journey to finding the family you deserve, whether by blood or by choice.